Hello guys, today we're going to be looking at the Dark Mechanicum units for Adeptus Titanicus. These are 4 new units which came out this weekend just gone and really do offer something a little bit new to the game. So as it's the first thing that we've had for Adeptus Titanicus in a long time, I figured we would do a quick deep dive into the rules and how we might actually use them in the game. But before we do go on, I just want to do a quick shout out to say thank you to all of our patrons who support this show. If you do want to help us continue to make content, please do check out our Patreon, the details of which are in the description below. We also have a free Discord server. It's very, very busy. There's always lots of conversation and chat going on there. So if you want to be part of the conversation, then please do check out our Discord server. Again, links are in the description. I think before we actually get into the actual terminals, there's a few things that we need to address before kind of going into this video. The first of which is that this release is a little bit holy at the point of recording. So there is a couple of things which are kind of assumed. There's also a few things which are just downright missing. In particular, how are you supposed to take these banners? The obvious one is that you treat them like knights, but then they aren't knights. They have no high scions, so they can't have a high king. So does that mean they can't go into a household? They don't have any maniples to go in alongside some Titanicus units. So what are they? So in this instance, we're going to treat these and consider these at this point in time to be similar to free blades. This means you can take 2 banners of these as reinforcements. With some luck, who knows, we may even see a new book come out with regards to the Dark Mechanicum, or to at least kind of address some of these. But at the very least, Games Workshop, please give us an FAQ so that we can fill some of these in. Maybe a new book will tell us that. Maybe a new book will give us a new battle force selection that we can choose from related to Dark Mechanicum, or maybe something more, who knows. Be nice to see that new Legions Imperialis Warmaster Maniple make an appearance at some point. There's still things that they could put in a book, Games Workshop. The other thing is that these can only be taken by traitors. It doesn't say this anywhere on the terminals, but the Dark Mechanicum were traitors. They weren't used by the Loyalist forces, so we're making that other assumption as well, that these must be taken in a traitor list. So with those assumptions aside, what we're going to do is, first off, have a look at some of these special rules. So there are 4 new Mechanicum units which have come into the game. We've got the Errax Butcher, the Tenebrax Archer, the Scintillax Cyclops, and the Serperos Overlord. And most of these share like the same rules sort of throughout. So the first off of these is networked anima. So the rules on the card for networked anima is that this banner may use the command of a friendly unit within 6 inches that has the networked anima special rule. It's pretty simple on the surface of it. As you will see throughout the banners when we start looking at them, there is some which are better at command than others. This means that by keeping a close coherency to some of those units, you can actually increase your command, let you pass orders a little bit easier, things like that. The second is agile. So again, this is a really simple, straightforward rule. They all have agile. This rule essentially means that these units can cross areas of difficult or dangerous terrain without penalty. So you don't need to worry about suffering any effects crossing over rivers, or if your opponent plays scatterable mines, etc., which is makes an area dangerous terrain, then they don't care. They're just going to carry on kind of as they like. But the last rule that they have, which runs more or less throughout all of the banners, which is possibly the thing which makes them the most unique and very different, is construct shields. To give you an idea, basically construct shields are a form of ion shield, but they work differently to how they work on a knight. So with a knight, you have a saving throw based on the number of knights that you have in the banner, and also the strength of the weapon which is coming in against you. So in most cases, if you are shooting some knights with some strength 4 Vulcan Megabolters, for instance, and you've got quite a lot of knights in the unit, they're going to get like a 3+ or sometimes a 2+ save against those, which makes them very difficult to get those low strength shots in. But on the other side of it, if you hit them with a big heavy strength 12, they get no save whatsoever and go straight through their armor. Construct shields work differently in that you have one static shield save. So Most of these are at a 4+, but there is some with a 3+, and that means that you always have a shield save of a 3+ or a 4+, regardless of the strength of the weapon, be it strength 3 or strength 13, or even higher if you're pushing with Maximal and things like that. So these have a construct shield level, which is equal to 1 times the starting number of stalkers in the banner. So this means if you have 6 in the banner, your construct shield level is 6. If you have 4 in the banner, then you have a construct shield level of 4. But why does this matter? Each time you fail a save roll, you decrease the number of construct shields by the number of saves that you failed. So if you started with 6 construct shields, you failed 2 shield saves against some incoming fire, then you decrease your 6 down to 4, and then when those go down to 0, you have no more construct shields and your ions are effectively gone for the rest of the game with no way of reclaiming those. So again, a little bit different to how knights work, but what this does mean is essentially you will always have some form of save at the start of the game. So if somebody is dropping a big pie plate on top of you turn 1 in the first fire stage, you're still going to get a save against that. It's not going to automatically go through armor like you will often see when playing against knights. It must be said that I feel like the construct shield level thing is something that should really have been maybe built into the terminal. They've obviously just reused the knight banners for their terminals with some slight tweaks, but when you have something which can change like that, you're going to need some way of keeping track of whatever your current construct shield level is. I really don't feel like they couldn't have put in another little pip tracker or something on the banner. There certainly seems to be enough space on most of these terminals that they could have done that. I feel like it's a little bit of an oversight, but if you're going to be running Dark Mechanicum, you are going to need some kind of tracker, be that like a wounds tracker or something which you may use in other games, a dice next to them like a d6 which you can count down. Just obviously remember to take those dice with you, maybe even leave it on the terminal so that you can keep track of how many you actually have remaining. So with those special rules banked, I think what we're going to do first is we're going to have a look at the Errax, which is the first one. So the Errax are 50 points, and for that you get 2 of the Errax Stalkers with the option to add up to an additional 4 more at 25 points each. So that caps out the banner of 6 at only 150 points. That makes the Errax the cheapest available unit in Adeptus Titanicus, cheaper even Armigers if you were to remove the fact that you need to take other banners to take Armigers in the first place. They come with the option of upgrading their las cutter to a melter gun at an additional 5 points, which means that would take your points, if you chose to take them all with melter guns, somewhere between 60 to 180 points for a banner, which is still incredibly cheap for the number of models that you might be choosing to take. Looking at the stat line, these are the close combat units which rely on very close range weapons to do the damage. They have a ballistic skill of 4+, they have a weapon skill of 3+, 9 inches of movement, and a 7+ command. They only have 2 structure points, which makes them quite fragile, and if you have a look at the thresholds for damage, they can take damage from as little as an 8, which really means that even strength 3 weapons are going to potentially be able to do damage against this, which is quite shocking. I mean, looking at the thresholds, they're very similar to Armigers, and with the 2 structure points as well, very similar to Armigers. The only difference here, I believe, is that the numbers between a direct hit, devastating hit, and a critical are slightly more forgiving than an Armiger. You've got 8 to 12 for a direct hit, 13 to 14 for a devastating hit, and then critical on a 15+. It's worth mentioning, of course, if you do take a critical hit with one of these, you're going to lose 2 of the Errax at the same time because of their low structure points. They do have construct shields. They have a 4+ construct shields, which does kind of, sort of, maybe offset their fragile nature a little bit. It's still, if they get hit by a pie plate or something like that, it's still going to hurt. They're probably still going to take they're still going to fail a few saves, and you're probably going to start losing models in this banner particularly quickly. And for that reason, I feel like this is a unit that, because it's so cheap, it's probably worth, if you do choose to take the Errax, that you max out the number that you have and go for a full banner of 6, because that gives you some ablative wounds, especially with the potential of losing 2 at a time if you get hit by big heavy strength weapons. And you really do need to think about your unit's coherency. So really make the most of the maximum distance between models to try and limit the number of hits that you're going to take from a pie plate hit, because 2 hits from a strength 12 bellicosa is going to be bad enough, never mind if you manage to overlap the pie plate on other models, and so you may be getting 2, 3, 4 plus hits from one bellicosa. Even though they aren't instantly through their shield saves, that's still going to hurt quite a lot. But I suppose it is better than them having nothing, like armatures would have in this particular case. So, weapon-wise, they come preloaded with a las cutter. The las cutter is a 1 dice strength 5 melee weapon. With the fusion trait, it's got a short of 2 inches and a +1 accuracy. That means that in close combat, you are going to be hitting on a 2+ with these. The fusion on strength 5 is odd. It basically means that you have a damage potential of anywhere between 7 to 15, which I think that's something like a 60% chance that you might do damage on these. And a 40% chance that you're going to bounce off of most Titans. And obviously with the strength 5 against other Knights, they're just going to bounce straight off their ion shields. So the las cutter's not great. It's obviously free. I think that the only reason that you would choose to take the las cutter is if you literally wanted an activation burn, take the cheapest possible units that you could. Maybe you had a few points left over you didn't know what to do with, something like that, just to fit in some of these to force your opponent to act before you actually want to activate your big stuff. On its own, though, the las cutter, I don't think it's going to do particularly well. And when you factor in as well that these have a 7+ command and it's a close combat unit, really they need to be full striding or they need to be charging. And on the 7+ on their own, yeah, you're going to struggle to get up the field. I think with these, unless you do some shenanigans like outflanking or something like that. But yeah, the strength 5 I feel is really, really poor. But like I said, super cheap, very, very cheap indeed. Could be quite a good activation burn. For the 5 points though, you can upgrade that to a melter. So you lose the melee trait and this becomes a ranged weapon, but then you get a melter gun, which is a short range of 3 inches with a +1 accuracy and a long range of 6 inches. It's 1 dice strength 8 with fusion. That's much more reasonable on the strength side of things. You're going to be hitting on 4 pluses because of its ballistic skill, but when you're within close combat range, that's going to go down to a 2+ because you'll obviously be using your weapon skill. That is much more, I think, reasonable. Although you are losing the melee special rule, which means when you are in close combat, you don't get that free target. You're still going to be targeting locations on a 4 at strength 8 with fusion. Much more reasonable. You know, any hit is going to, for most lighter Titans, certainly you're going to do at least a point of damage, but it can go all the way up to strength 18, which will crit pretty much everything. And you can still do damage at long range. I know it's only 6 inches, but you know that is still a strength 8 fusion blast at 6 inches. Although your damage potential there will fall slightly down to a max out of 14. So yeah, I mean, if I was taking these as a serious unit, I think I would definitely take the melter gun every single time. It's worth the 5 points, and like I say, only capping out at, 180 points, I think I said, for 6 of them with melter guns. It's still pretty good, still pretty cheap. It's all right. Yeah, they're all right. The only downside for taking the melter gun, of course, is because you have no melee weapon now, you can't really charge. The only thing that you will be able to do on a charge is do a smash attack. And at a scale of 3, the only thing you're going to hurt there is Knights. And really, it's even those are going to bounce. So that's a shame. You'll have to sort of move these into close combat with things rather than rely on charges if you take the melter gun, whereas obviously if you take the las cutter, you can do a charge if you get off a charge. But based on their command, I don't think they're going to be getting off very many orders in the first place. So the Errax on first glance, I think pretty underwhelming. Although they're really, really cheap, I think there's other things which do what these do better. Primary advantage is a burned activation, I think. You're not going to do serious damage with these. They are a cheap nuisance unit, a distraction Hormagaunt, let's say. Not quite a Carnifex, but like a Hormagaunt. A little bit less to worry about, but still, if you ignore them, I'm sure that they will do some pain if you get in the flanks with them or if you get in the rears. So yeah, definitely not something to ignore, but really I think there are going to be bigger things to worry about early on, and these will fall over to a stiff breeze. So let's see how the other ones pan out, shall we, instead. Next up is the Tenebrax. So the Tenebrax is the long-range fire support unit of the lot. These are 80 points for 2, and you have the option of adding again an additional 4 at 40 points each, which means 6 sets you back 240 points. That's slightly more than a tournament pattern Warhound with Plasma and Vulcan Megabolter. But they do come equipped with both weapons, the Storm Laser Flenser and the Exoplanar Cannon. They are ballistic skill of 3+, weapon skill of 4+, speed of 7 inches, command of 6+. So again, quite a high command, not particularly great on that side of things. Their biggest downside, though, is they have no construct shields. So they have no shields whatsoever, no ions in any shape or form. That makes these guys really, really fragile. They do have an additional structure point over the Errax, but their damage threshold remains the same. That makes these guys a massive target for those turn 1 pie plates or long range weapons. Even Apocalypse missile launchers are going to be able to do damage at these with only a strength of with only a damage threshold of 8 to start with. Sending those Apocalypse missile launchers, you know, you only need a 4+ to do a point of damage, and with 3 each, yeah, they're going to start losing models very, very quickly, I think, if you choose to target them early on. Main reason to take these is for the weapons. The Storm Laser Flenser is a 2 dice, strength 5, short range of 8 inches, long range of 30 inches with a +1 to hit weapon. This makes it an excellent shield stripper as long as the whole banner can draw a line of sight to it. So putting that into context, a banner of 6 of these is going to pump out 12 strength 5 hits, hitting on 2s over 8 inches, which makes it kind of like a super paired Gatler. Obviously you don't get the benefit at short range to have ordnance like you do on the Gatler, but for shield stripping purposes, this makes the Storm Laser Flenser particularly good at doing that. So if you think about it, you know, you're hitting on 2s, 12 dice, that's an average of 10 shield saves per shot that you're basically putting out of these. So very, very good at stripping shields. You also have the Exoplanar Cannon. These are 2 dice, strength 6, short range of 8 with a +1 modifier, long range of 16 inches. So sort of quite similar to the Flenser, very good shield stripper. It's going to be another 12 dice at 6, strength 6, up to 16 inches. So yeah, that's another really good shield stripper, but the extra strength does mean that it can chip away at some low armor as well. It will certainly make people think about getting too close to these, because if you get within 16 inches, all of a sudden you're going to get 24 shots at you, 12 from the Flenser and 12 from the Exoplanar. So yeah, it really does punch out quite a lot of damage in that regards. If you somehow were able to get these into a side or a rear location, you know, pumping that strength 6 up to a potential strength 8 makes them a significant concern. Their speed of 7 is quite slow, and with their command of 6+, they're going to struggle to get off full stride orders and things like that. But really, are you going to do that for them? I mean, personally, I would be using these probably as a backline long-range shield stripping objective holder. Although saying that, with their lack of construct shields, they're very vulnerable. The weapons can pump out a lot of damage, but really, they are a primary target for most players who are going to be coming up against these, because they'll be very quick to take off the table, and you don't want that sort of damage being thrown your way. So whether or not you'll get to use them in the sides or the rear, I don't know. A first fire on these guys is going to be amazing, coupled with what they can do in the combat phase. But strength 6 on their own, they're going to struggle to do it, and you may need to rely on other things, which we'll come to in a minute, to help boost that command and reliably start getting off some of those some of those orders. I think with these there's probably a points sweet spot. 240 feels like quite a lot of points for 6 of these, for something which could potentially be removed off the board in one go. 4 of them at 160 feels a little bit more okay. You're still pumping out their 8 shots from each weapon, but obviously the 6 does mean that you have a bit of ablative wounds, so if you lose a couple, then your damage output's still pretty good. Whereas if you start at 4, you're very quickly going to be kind of not much of a threat anymore, sadly. But yeah, absolutely. The 12 dice from each feels significantly ruder. I'm just not certain at this point if it's worth the 240 points. That kind of puts it in the same categories as 3 Cerastus Knight Lancers or a Warhound Titan, and I think I would probably always choose one of those 2 things instead. If I was looking for a shield stripper, I would take a double Vulcan Mega Bolter Warhound for 200 points, save myself 40, and still do a considerable amount of damage and have the advantages of being a Titan and everything that comes with that. But that being said, it's definitely a role for it. I think it's good at what it does. It's just very fragile. So next up, we are going to take a look at the Scintillax. So the Scintillax is 60 points, and again this is 60 points for 2 models. And again, you can add an additional 4, but each of these is at 25 points, which means that you cap out a banner of 6 at 160. And this is the only banner in the list that you actually get a discount for buying more, which is really nice. 25 points each instead of 30 points each, which would be what it would be if it was halved, is pretty good. They come with a las cutter, which we've seen on the Errax. And you can upgrade them with either a storm laser or an exoplanar cannon for 10 points. Means that they would come in at between 80 and 220 points. And I do feel like that is probably a worthwhile expenditure if you're going to take the Scintillax for more than just a burned activation. And if you're going to take a burned activation, you're probably going to take the Errax anyway. And they have a ballistic skill of 3+, weapon skill of 4+, 8 inches of movement, and a 4+ command. So the 4+ here is the big deal with these guys, because they're the only Dark Mechanicum unit which can reliably pass any form of order. So that's really, really good. It makes them very, very flexible. They can do a bit of combat if they choose to do the las cutter or keep the las cutter. I'm not sure why you would, but really you are looking at upgrading to either the storm laser or the exoplanar cannon. Exoplanar cannon is identical to what we talked about on the Tenebrax. Exactly the same weapon, so pretty good at short range shield stripping. Maybe a little bit of damage against low armor locations. However, the storm laser is, in my opinion, particularly spicy. It's a 3 dice, strength 4, short range of 8, long range of 24 with rapid weapon. It doesn't have like a bonus to accuracy like, say, the Vulcan Mega Bolter does at close range, but it effectively makes it a Vulcan Mega Bolter with 4 inches of extra range for the trade-off of that +1 to hit. A normal banner of these is the equivalent of 1 Vulcan Mega Bolter with 6 dice, but if you took 6 of these, then all of a sudden you are looking at 18 dice worth of strength 4 shield stripping with rapid to pump out, and that is a lot of dice. If I've done the maths right, you've got 18 dice, you're hitting on 3s on average. You should get around 14 hits or so, including your rapids, and that's in one attack. that's pretty disgusting. This can make the storm laser a particularly good shield stripper, but it can also mean that it's very good at finishing as well. So if you can get some compromised location bonuses, or you can get a side or a rear arc with these guys, then that's a lot of dice, and that's going to just death by 1,000 cuts chip away and do lots of little points of damage here and there to all but the heaviest of Titans out there. I like the Scintillax a lot. It's a lot more versatile than the other ones that we've seen so far. The fact that it can pass orders on a 4+ is brilliant. It can also bestow that 4+ command using networked anima to other units around them. So this is why I was saying with the Tenebrax getting those first fires off. If you've got a Scintillax banner within 6 inches of it, it can try and get a first fire off on a 4+. Much more reasonable than the 6+ that they have. These guys are going to be, I think they're a significant threat if you ignore them. I think that they're well costed for the price. I think whether you take these over a Warhound, again, personal choice. I do think that they have a role. I do think that they can be quite a threat. They're just very fragile, and they will die quite quickly, even with their construct shields. And these guys do have construct shields, unlike the Tenebrax. They've got the 4+ ion shield level, which is okay, and they'll certainly sort of help against those big, heavy hits, which are going to be looking at doing auto crits. I think as long as you use cover to your advantage, careful movement, careful deployment, and think about your unit coherency, you will get the most out of this unit. And I think we'll see a lot of play with the Scintillax. I've got a feeling that they'll be quite common. Last up, we have the Serperos. So this is apparently the big boy of the Dark Mechanicum. At least it's classed as a super heavy vehicle in Legions Imperialis, but really all that translates to in Adeptus Titanicus is that it has a direct hit damage threshold starting at 9, and a critical hit, you need the 16+. So that threshold is taken much more in line with Cerastus Knights. Means that they're reasonably hardy, but still only 3 structure points. 3 still feels like not a lot. Their construct shields, however, are a 3+. They're the only unit for the Dark Mechanicum which has a 3+. Feels a lot better at 3+. I feel like you're going to get much more play out of that. Those structure points are going to go a lot further, having an ion level of 3+ permanently. It's 80 points for 2 of them. And on top of that, you can get an additional 4, same as everything else. This time for 40 points each, and they come equipped with the las cutters, which we've seen on other ones, and either a storm laser array or an exoplanar bombard. This means 6 of these is going to cap out at 240 points. You've got no additional points that you need to add in upgrades or anything. So it has a melee option built in, even though it's not a particularly good one. And then you've got the choice of the Storm Laser Array or the Exoplanar Bombard. It's got a ballistic skill of 3+, weapon skill of 4+, 8 inches of movement, and a 7+ command. That command, again, pretty naff. Everything else, okay. I think you're going to have to really use Scintillax to get orders off with these guys if you want to. Babysitting them with the Scintillax will be how we see them deployed if they're taken in 2 banners. If they're deployed normally, and we'll come to that in a minute. Weapon wise, the Storm Laser Array is identical to the Storm Laser that we saw on the Scintillax. I'm not sure why it's called the Storm Laser Array. Normally when they call a weapon something different, it means that there is a difference between the 2 weapons. However, it's identical to the Storm Laser. I don't know if this is just a typo or intentional, but again, exactly the same pros that we saw in the Scintillax. Excellent shield stripper. Going to do a lot of shield stripping and finishing nonsense with that, depending on the amount that you have in the banner when you're shooting. And then you have the Exoplanar Bombard. This shares a lot of the same characteristics as the Exoplanar Cannon. However, the big difference on this one is it has the bypass special rule. And the bypass special rule, if you don't already know, means that you ignore ion shields and you ignore void shields, which means that when this guy shoots, it goes straight onto the armor. No shield saves, will not interact with shields at all. And yeah, that's pretty good. And as we said kind of at the start with construct shields, they're never ignored for the purposes of strength. Bypass will ignore them. They just ignore ions outright. So these against other knights will work, although the strength of 6 still pretty low. But yeah, 2 dice, strength 6 with bypass. That low strength is probably going to struggle against like most armored titans, unless you can get, and knights for that, probably less so for knights. But unless you can get in a flank or rear, or it's a compromised location. But with it being bypass, there's a good chance you're going to be shooting this at something with its shields up. So you're probably going to be shooting at a fresh damage location, and you're going to need to be hitting 10s minimum for titans to do damage to like a Reaver or a Warhound. So flanks, rears, getting those hits are going to be, you know, it's going to be important. But if you took 6 of these as an example, you know, you're rolling 12 dice at that point. On average, you're probably going to hit about 8 of those, especially if you're close. And of that 8, probably about 4 of those is going to do enough damage to actually get through and do a direct hit at least on something like a Warhound. Which means that you should do 4 points of damage at least to something that's lightly armoured. Which means, you know, you're going to be pushing a Warhound pretty close to being compromised, if not compromising it in one hit. So against light armoured stuff, like the Serperos seems pretty good. I think it's just going to struggle a bit more against those bigger targets, like Warlords, if you don't have some way of pumping those numbers up. It's an odd one, the Serperos. It's a little bit more. Well, it's on the more expensive end of things. I think that the way that you run these is you outflank them. If you're thinking about spending 2 stratagem points on an outflank that you would normally put on like a Cerastus Knight banner or something like that, I think it would probably be worth doing it on the Serperos. Unless you've completely screwed up the flank that you're going to come in on, you can probably guarantee you will come onto the board on turn 2 and be in your long range. So you will be able to shoot. You're going to be bypassing. If you've set up reasonably well, you should hopefully be in the flank. If not, you should hopefully be in a rear, maybe. And yeah, because of their 3+ ion saves, you're not going to be able to just blow them straight off the board before they have time to act as well. As an opponent shooting back at them, like, can sometimes be a bit of a problem when it comes to you know, Armigers doing the same, or even Cerastus Knights. You know, before they can do anything, they're blown off. And the Cerastus, the Lancers in particular, who need to charge. You can't charge, can you, on the turn you come onto the board from outflank, but you can shoot, which means that the Exoplanar Bombard will be shooting from turn 2, and I do think that is probably the way that you take these and how you play them for the most effect. So, what's my opinion on them overall? They're okay, I think. Overall, there's nothing particularly broken about the Dark Mechanicum. I think it's got some interesting new rules to play around with. I like that construct shields aren't just ion shields, and they are something different. They'll play differently. I think we'll see a lot more Scintillax being deployed out of all of them, purely because of their cost effectiveness, but also they're pretty versatile. I don't think we will see much when it comes to things like the Errax, I'm afraid to say. I don't think it does close combat good enough to be taken as a serious option over, say, a Cerastus. The only reason that you would take those is if you want some activation burns, and that is a tactic in itself, to try and just out-activate your opponent. But as a serious unit, I'm not sure the Errax really have a place. The Tenebrax as well, I want to love them. I feel like they've been done a bit of dirty by not being given any construct shields. I know that's in the lore. I know that's how it's similar in Legions Imperialis as well. But I don't think they would be broken with construct shields at a 4-up, same as everybody else. But without them, they're just a massive target, and I feel like they'd be a waste of points to just be removed off the board really, really quickly by even the lowliest of weapons would be able to do damage and seriously hurt them. Like Apocalypse missile launchers, as an example, strength 4, no shield saves. You know, you're going to be doing damage against strength 8, and 10 hits against them, probably a 2+ for long range. It's, yeah, they're gonna hurt. The standout units for me are the Scintillax, are the Serperos, for the reasons that I've been talking about them. I think that the Scintillax with the Storm Laser, I think, is my personal favourite. They're very well costed for the size of unit that they are. They can dish out a significant amount of shield stripping and possible finishing with those. And that command of 4+ just means that they can do stuff. And the Serperos as well. I like the Serperos. Probably not as much as the Scintillax. If I was taking the Serperos, I would either take them on their own with the intention that they are going to be an outflanking unit, or I would double them up with the Scintillax to take advantage of the 4-up command. I don't think I would be taking them if I wasn't planning on outflanking them. I don't think that they're versatile enough, and they're a bit ponderous. Their speed of 8 is okay, but it could be a lot better. I think with all of these, there's probably like a sweet spot in the number of models that you take in a banner. Obviously, the number of models equals your construct save, so the more you have, the longer it takes to chew through those, so you retain a shield save for longer. But obviously, the price starts stacking. I think we'll see these probably mostly in 4s to 6s, unless you're just activation burning, and that feels about right to me. I mean, the Serperos, I think, a banner of 6 on its own. The Scintillax, maybe 2 banners of 4. Something like that could be quite good, sort of in the middle, you know, multiple threats to kind of deal with. Yeah, they are a welcome addition to Adeptus Titanicus. It's something new, it's something fresh. Whether we see any more of these rules kind of fleshed out in a future book, who knows? It would be nice to see maybe them expanding the rules to include Dark Mechanicum in mana pools, maybe in new mana pools, which we might see, or some household equivalent rules which make them maybe a little bit better at passing orders or gaining some sort of ability similar to the sort of the many abilities that the households can draw on from their own personal stratagems. Maybe we'll even see some Dark Mechanicum stratagems. A new book at this point would be welcome, I think. It's been a long drought for Adeptus Titanicus. It's great to see that we're still getting support and we're still being considered. It would be nice to see a little bit more in 2025, though. I guess we'll just see what the landscape looks like at the start of next year. And at the very least, let's hope that we get an FAQ to address some of those points regarding how you're supposed to take these if we're not going to get a book. So what's your thoughts on the new Dark Mechanicum units? Do you like them? Are you going to be taking them? Have you picked them up? Or are they kind of just they're cool, so I'm going to include them anyway kind of model? I wouldn't blame you for the latter, because they are very, very cool. It's got Johnny very, very excited as he's beavering away trying to paint up his. Let us know what your thoughts are. Stick them in the comments if you've got any ideas how you would run them. Maybe you would run them slightly differently to me. Love to hear your thoughts. Stick them in the comments, and until next time, guys, we'll see you again, and always remember to go Maximal.